Beneath the city of Paris, there is another city. Most people know about the catacombs, the official ones, the tourist ones, where you walk in neat lines past walls of carefully arranged bones and take photographs and buy a ticket on the way out. 6 million people are buried down there, give or take, the accumulated dead of centuries stacked and sorted into corridors that stretch for miles under the streets. It is eerie in the way that tourist attractions are eerie. Controlled, lit, guided, safe. But the official catacombs are only a small fraction of what is actually down there. Beneath Paris, running in every direction under the city's foundations, is a network of tunnels that stretches for nearly 300 kilometers. Old quarry tunnels, mostly, dug over centuries to extract the limestone that built the city above. They run under apartment buildings and government offices and restaurants and hospitals. They run under the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre and the Élysée Palace. They are unmapped in their entirety. They are officially closed to the public. And for decades, a subculture of urban explorers called cataphiles has been quietly descending into them through hidden entrances scattered across the city, often in plain sight, in parks and under manholes and behind unmarked doors in forgotten corners of the city. The cataphiles have their own culture, their own rules, their own geography. They know tunnels that don't appear on any official map. They know rooms and chambers and underground lakes that the city above has no record of. Some of them have been going down for 30 years. Some go down for a few hours. Some, occasionally, do not come back. But this story is not about the cataphiles. This story is about what a police unit found in September of 2004 during a routine training exercise in a previously uncharted section of the tunnels beneath the Chaillot Hill in the 16th arrondissement of Paris, one of the city's most expensive and respectable neighborhoods, directly across the Seine from the Eiffel Tower. The officers were from the UIISC, a French national emergency response unit that periodically trains in the catacombs to prepare for disaster scenarios. They had maps of the section they were entering. The maps were old, but they were the best available. They followed the tunnels as charted, noting landmarks, checking distances, doing what they had done in other sections many times before. And then they found a tunnel that was not on the map. This was not entirely unusual. Unmapped tunnels exist throughout the network, but what was unusual was what the tunnel led to. At the end of it, behind a heavy wooden door fitted with a lock that showed clear signs of regular use, they found a large underground chamber. The chamber had been carved out of the limestone, not by the original quarrymen, but more recently, deliberately, by someone who knew what they were doing. The ceiling was high, the floor was level, and the room was furnished, not abandoned, not decorated with the spray paint and candles that cataphiles sometimes leave behind. Furnished. There were chairs and tables. There were shelves carved directly into the rock walls. On those shelves were bottles of wine, some of them high quality, some of them empty. There was a bar, a proper bar, stocked, with glasses. There was a kitchen area with a working, professional-grade oven and cooking equipment. There were film reels and a projector, set up and ready to use, pointed at a blank section of wall. There were seats arranged in front of it, like a small cinema. There was a larger screen in an adjacent room, connected to a receiver capable of pulling in television signals from above ground. There were security cameras, multiple cameras, positioned to monitor the approaches to the chamber through the tunnels, connected to a monitoring station inside the room itself. The power was on. The electricity was running through cables that had been professionally installed and connected to the city's grid in a way the investigators could not immediately trace. The police called in specialists. The specialists came down and documented everything. They took photographs. They tested the equipment. The oven worked. The projector worked. The television received signal. The security cameras were active. And then the specialists came back 3 days later to begin a more thorough investigation, intending to trace the power source and identify whoever had built and was using the chamber. The power was off. The equipment was gone. The wine was gone. The film reels were gone. The chairs and tables were still there, but everything that could be carried had been removed. Cleanly, completely, without a trace beyond the furniture itself. Someone had been watching the security cameras. Someone had seen the police arrive. And in 3 days, whoever had built that chamber had dismantled it and vanished back into 300 kilometers of unmapped tunnels. The investigation was handed to the Brigade Criminelle, Paris's serious crime unit. They spent months trying to identify who had built the room, who had used it, and for what purpose. They interviewed known cataphiles. They traced the electrical connection, which had been severed and removed so thoroughly that determining where it had connected to the grid above proved extremely difficult. They studied the construction of the chamber itself and concluded it had taken significant time, skill, and resources to create. Not the work of a lone eccentric, but of a group with money, expertise, and a very good reason to want privacy. They never identified anyone. The case was officially closed without a suspect, without a motive, and without any explanation of what the room had been used for. Now, at this point in the story, most people's minds go to the obvious places. A criminal organization, a secret society, a wealthy collector of illegal films. And these are all reasonable guesses. The room had a cinema, it had a bar, it had a kitchen. Whatever happened there, it happened in comfort, in secret, underground, beneath one of the most expensive neighborhoods in one of the most surveilled cities in the world. Whatever it was, someone wanted it to be invisible. But here is where I want to slow down, because I think the obvious explanations miss something. The cataphiles, the people who actually know those tunnels, who have been going down for decades and have mapped sections that no official body has ever seen, reacted to the discovery of the Chaillot chamber with something that surprised many of the journalists who covered the story. They were not shocked. They were not even particularly surprised. Several of them, speaking anonymously to reporters, said variations of the same thing, that the chamber was not unique, that there were other rooms down there, rooms they had found and chosen not to report, rooms they had been asked, by whoever maintained them, to keep quiet about. One cataphile, who had been exploring the tunnels for over 20 years and agreed to speak on the condition of anonymity, said that the underground of Paris contained things that the city above would find deeply uncomfortable. He was not specific. He said only that the people who used certain chambers had resources and influence, and had been doing so for a very long time. He said the Chaillot room was unusual only in that it had been found by the police rather than by cataphiles who understood the etiquette of looking the other way. Etiquette. That is the word he used. I have thought about that word many times since I first read this account. There is a concept in urban exploration culture called the unwritten rule. You do not disturb what you find, you do not reveal what you see, and you do not ask questions about things that are clearly not meant to be found. It is a code that exists partly for practical reasons. Cataphiles operate illegally, and drawing attention to themselves is dangerous, but partly for something else. Something closer to respect for the fact that the underground has its own logic, its own inhabitants, its own history that predates the city above and will outlast it. Paris was built on these tunnels. The limestone that makes up its most beautiful buildings, its churches and palaces and bridges, came out of the ground beneath it. The city is, in a very literal sense, hollow. And into that hollowness, for centuries, people have been putting things they did not want the surface world to see. The bones of the dead, obviously, but other things too. The investigating officers who first found the Chaillot chamber described their experience of entering it in terms that struck me as unusually emotional for a police report. One of them, interviewed afterward, said that the strangest thing was not the room itself, but the feeling of it. The sense that they had walked into a space that was entirely complete, entirely functional, entirely inhabited, and yet entirely silent. He said it felt less like discovering an abandoned place and more like walking into someone's life at the exact moment they had stepped out of it. He said the wine glasses on the bar still had wine in them. He said the chairs around the cinema screen were still positioned the way people leave chairs when they intend to come back. He said the oven was still warm. I keep thinking about that oven, about the meal that had just been cooked, about the film that had just been watched. About the people who had been sitting in those chairs, beneath the 16th arrondissement, beneath the City of Light, beneath everything, and had looked at their security monitors and seen torchlight approaching through the tunnel, and had quietly, without panic, begun to pack. Who were they? What were they doing? What did they watch on that screen, in that room that smelled of warm food and good wine, 3 stories below the Paris street? We don't know. We will probably never know. The Brigade Criminelle closed the file. The tunnels are still there, all 300 kilometers of them, running under the city in the dark. And somewhere in that darkness, almost certainly, other rooms exist that no police unit has ever found. Because the people who built them learned, in September of 2004, exactly how much time they had to disappear. 3 days. That's all it takes, apparently, to make a life underground vanish completely. The fire is warm up here. The night is quiet. And somewhere beneath a city you may have walked through, beneath streets you may have photographed, beneath cafes where you may have had coffee and watched the world go by, something is happening that you are not supposed to know about. Sleep well.